here today for Craftie Cafe, and for today's project I'm going to be using this Marianne Design stamp set. This is a layering stamp set that's called Tiny Chrysanthemums, and I'm also going to be using the Waffle Flower Cutaway Alpha for my custom sentiment as well. So I'm going to start off by stamping out these flowers. So I'm going ahead and using some Lawn Fawn inks for this. I've already stamped the blue flower and now I'm going to stamp the pink flower. So I start off with my base layer of ballet slippers, my second layer was bubblegum, and my final layer was guava. Now I'm moving on to stamping my orange flower, which I'm starting off with peach fuzz. Then the second layer is going to be fake tan, and my final layer is going to be pumpkin spice. And you can see here as I'm layering them up, I am not layering them up perfectly. They're not even stamped on top of each other properly at all. I'm really bad at layering stamps. I absolutely love them, but when they're quite perfect like this, I do struggle a little bit. So I wasn't bothered that they weren't lined up properly. I'm not using a coordinating die or anything like that. I'm just going to fussy cut them out, so it was no worries that they were a little bit off, and I sort of think they look a bit more fun, a little bit wonky and things anyway. So then I just went ahead and stamped off the leaves, and I laid them up with three layers with some Lawn Fawn inks as well. All of them will be listed over at the blog as well, just in case you want to know the exact colours that I used. Then I just went ahead and took my fine detail cutting scissors and cut them all out. And also I just wanted to give another tip with this stamp set. I would recommend rubbing over each of the stamps with an eraser before you stamp them, just so the ink will sort of stick a little bit better and you'll get a more solid image. I did have to stamp these out quite a few times to get them to stamp well, but I just used an eraser and they worked great. So now that they are all cut out, I'm just sort of layering them up on my craft mat to sort of know where I want them to be adhered on my card base, and now I can start with my background. So I wanted to add some yellow into this card, so I'm first just wetting a piece of watercolor cardstock, and I'm going to use just this yellow color from my Jello Mission Gold watercolor palette. You can use whatever you like. You can use distress inks, distress oxide inks. You can even use a yellow Lawn Fawn ink. I'm just using a watercolor palette because this is just what I had out on my desk at the time, but anything would work just as well. Basically, I just wanted a little bit of yellow down on my base, and so the watercolor was just the easiest thing, but you could even do some ink blending if you would prefer. So with my watercolouring, I just placed down some water, added on the yellow on top, and then because I sort of want the edges to fade out into white, I'm just going around with a paper towel and sort of picking up the harsh edges of paint with a paper towel, and that sort of just blends it out really nicely and creates a really soft look. So once I've finished off my background, I'm just going to dab around the edges a little bit more and then use my heat tool to dry that off completely. And you know that it's dry when it's not cold anymore. So once I have completely heat dried this, I needed it to be completely dry because I'm going to heat emboss over this for my sentiment. So from the Cutaway Alpha stamp set from Waffle Flower, I'm going to just stamp the word mum. So I didn't have a stamp set, I don't think, that actually had the word mum in it. So I wanted to create my own. Usually it's the American spelling. So I like to create my own, and so I'm just going to line them up on an acrylic block and then stamp down onto my yellow panel. And this is why I need it to be completely dry, because I don't want there to be any stray bits of embossing powder or anything like that on the background. So since these letters are all the same height, they are incredibly easy to line up, but just to help with lining them up, just to make sure that they are definitely straight, I just made sure I used a block with lines on it. But as I said, these stamps are really easy to line up next to each other, so you shouldn't really have a problem using a block with outlines either. So I've just went ahead and cut down my yellow watercolor panel just to do it a little bit skinnier, since I want there to be some pen and paper behind this piece eventually. So I'm just using some Versamark ink now after going over my entire background with an embossing powder tool. I just went ahead and stamped down the MU onto sort of the center of my background here with the Versamark ink, and then I'm just going ahead and putting my head sort of over the top of it to line up the second M, since there wasn't two M's in this set. And now I'm going to use some gold heat embossing powder. This is just from Zing, but any brand will work. This is just what I still have in my stash. So now that I have coated that with the embossing powder, I'm just making sure I get a nice coverage, I'm going to take that off to the side and heat set that powder with my heat tool. So now that that panel has all been heat embossed, I can work on adhering my flowers. So I'm just using some pop dots and just adhering them all onto the backs of my flowers, and then I'm going to arrange them in a line underneath the mum word. So when I stamped the mum word, I tried to get it as sort of centered as possible, and also more towards the top because I wanted there to be room for the flowers. I probably should have stamped it a little bit further up, but I wasn't going to redo the panel at all, so I just left it and it worked out fine. So now I'm just removing the backers off my pop dots, and then I'm going to adhere on the leaves as well. So I probably only really needed a couple of leaves, but I tried to get it sort of as symmetrical as possible. In the end, I think it looks a little bit odd, but it's probably due to my bad fussy cutting skills that it looks odd. But I just was basically just trying to lay out these leaves as good as possible in a way that it looked nice-ish. So this is what I came up with. Once I adhered those down onto the bottom though, I'm gonna go ahead and stamp the additional sentiment. So I pulled out a sentiment set, I think from My Favorite Things, just with all these skinny sentiments on there. I think it's called Essential Sentiments or something like that, but any like skinny sentiment like this would work, and it just says I love you. So I just went ahead and white heat embossed that onto a thin black strip of cardstock, and I'm just going to pop that up on some more foam tape or foam dots, and then just adhere that under the mum word. I think it's super cute. And now that my panel is all finished, I'm going to go ahead and adhere this onto a piece of pattern paper and then onto a card base. So I'm using the Lawn Fawn Perfectly Applied Paper Pad, and just using a piece that sort of incorporates all the colours that I used on my card today. And then I'm just adding some foam tape onto the back of this panel. And what's really fun about these foam dots is that you can cut off the excess once you've used all the pop dots and use all the negative pieces as actual strips of foam tape as well. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck, and really super handy, so you don't have too much wastage from this packaging, I guess, which is really nice. So I've just gone ahead and peeled off all of the backers, and I'm gonna adhere this into the center of my pattern paper. I did just go for some pattern paper that sort of matched the colors that I was using well enough. Once I've adhered this panel down onto the pattern paper, I'm gonna adhere the whole entire panel on to a card base, just with some runner adhesive so it's nice and flat, as there is quite a bit of dimension on here already. Luckily, I live with my mum at home, so I can just hand this to her, but if you were going to send it in the post, you know, you sort of want to eliminate on too much bulkage. So anyway, I'm just going to line this up on my background and stick it down, and that finishes up my card for today. So I hope you guys enjoyed seeing me use this Tiny Chrysanthemums stamp set. Be sure to check back in a couple weeks, as I'm gonna use this stamp set again, but for a completely different occasion. That's something new that's going on at Craftie Cafe at the moment. We are going to be using the same products for a couple of projects in a row, just to see how far we can stretch the stamp, which I think is super duper fun, and I can't wait to share more. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will catch you all next time.